Welcome to the live stream. We're going to wait for a few people to join in here. I'm going to be monitoring it as we go. Um, Basically, today we're going to talk just briefly about what's happening at these noon runs. There's been a lot of questions on Twitter. Uh, are we done yet? Is there more to come? What's it going to look like? What's happening with the models right now? And I think there's some interesting stuff going on at 500 millibars in the middle atmosphere that we can take a look at and probably explain to some extent what we're seeing. If you're noticing any technical difficulties or anything like that, absolutely let me know. This first stream of the season, so things have changed. I've got a different monitor. The color's a little bit wonky because I'm using HDR and stream software doesn't like that and everything. But once we get a few people on here, we'll take a look at what's going on. Until then, we're gonna put her back to hold, and I'm gonna go check some of the stream. All right, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. I don't know how many people see this. Most of you all can catch it on archive. You're not here for the live event. Just a quick note: I'm probably not going to be able to see chat. I've only got one big monitor set up right now, and I've got a lot of screens. So I'll periodically check over there, but may not be able to get you immediately. So for those that are new to this channel, to storm tracking winter storms especially, one of the things that we're always going to do is start at the upper levels of the atmosphere. At the upper levels of um, the atmosphere behaves more like a fluid. There's less perturbations. You don't have to worry quite as much about things like the heating of the ground, what maybe local geography would have to play, where the sources of moisture are. It's basically just wind speed and direction, what the wind is doing at the upper levels. And that really guides everything at the lower level. It's simpler for the models to really lock onto and develop a solution for, but it also guides what's happening lower. And because what's happening lower is so much more complex, the models usually have a harder time with that at the same time. So we start at the 500 millibar level. You all have heard me say for several days now that the upper low spinning over the Hudson Bay is going to be one of the more important features for us to watch. And for those of you that have been following along with the noon run of the GFS, you're probably seeing a storm track that's a little bit further west than we've seen the last few runs, maybe back toward yesterday afternoon or maybe even yesterday morning in terms of how far west things are. You're also probably, if you're looking at the surface map, which you should not be doing yet, you're probably seeing some like weird dry slots, missing snow that's not filling into the south like it has been. That is a side effect of the surface being too difficult to model this far out. So really, you probably shouldn't be looking at the surface map in terms of precipitation, maybe pressure at this point. But 500 millibars is the place to go to track storm like this from a weekend. So we're going to start with today and roll forward on the most recent run of this model. And there's a couple things that we're going to touch on along the way. So the very first thing that I'm gonna call out is this nice round upper low that's spinning over there today and some of the energy that's pushing underneath of it. That's what's generating the flurries if you're looking outside right now. It's important to note that the orientation of this is very much northwest to southeast, and it's also important to note how this energy gets wrapped up into it and the direction that it moves as it leaves, because that's part of a pattern that we've seen recently. There have been these upper lows that have formed over here. Storms have rotated down around them, and the direction that they leave determines the direction that the energy arrives from the next system. So as we walk forward in time, we're going to see that it kind of just strings out, right? The southern energy is incorporated. I'm going to say southern loosely. The mid-level energy is incorporated toward one side of it. It kind of elongates, and it oozes out to the south and east. That's important because the next upper low that develops determines how the energy comes in for us at the end of the week. So several models have had this look for some time now. The GFS was very steadfast from noon yesterday to the 6 o'clock run to the midnight run, even the 6 o'clock run this morning, that this upper low is compact. It's not elongated. It's got a lot of friends in that. The short range Canadian looks that way. The NAM, as far out as it can go, looks that way. Even the Icon at times has looked that way. Really, the only model that has strung this upper level low out across Canada has been the Euro and at times the long range Canadian, not all the time. So what has changed that's bringing our energy further west today than what we saw over the last 24 hours? I'm going to go check the stream here. Okay, got Cameron's online, so we're good. What's changed? Well, essentially, the GFS is incorporating this piece of energy into this upper low sooner than it had in the past, which is kind of a red flag because one of the things that the GFS does is it moves things along faster than they happen in real life. It's a progressive bias to the model. So I'm not 100% sure that this piece of energy is incorporated quite so quickly on this. The other thing that's happened here is you'll recall that the last one in the previous the current upper level low that's sitting up there had a tilt very much like this. This upper low is a lot flatter. It's a little bit more spread out, and it's exiting scene to the northeast, which we've not seen since the blocking established over Greenland. There's not really much that says that that's correct, including the GFS just 6 hours ago. So in all likelihood, one of the main drivers of our energy appearing west is placed incorrectly in this model. If this energy is down here, where the last 2 or 3 have been, and if it exits in a southeasterly direction instead of a northeasterly direction, it allows the trough to dig farther. Okay, we've talked a lot about troughs digging. What does that mean? You have energy coming into the mid-latitudes from the northwest, and you can kind of see that it's perturbed these lines of equal pressure, right? If you have a large upper low spinning up here, your energy is going to follow around that upper low. And the tilt of the upper low, when the energy encounters it, determines whether the energy digs to the south or whether it moves, west to east across the country. If an upper low is big and fat like this, the energy is going to move pretty much west to east across the country. If we have a nice tilt to it, the energy is going to move deeper into the country before it forms a deep trough, goes vertical, goes eventually negative, and forms a storm and moves it up the coast. So, very early on in this run, I am concerned about the placement of that upper low. It is not what the GFS and several other models have. Moving on, we quickly see that upper low pulls off to the northeast instead of the southeast, which again is different from the pattern that we've seen, and it's different than what the GFS has shown over the last day and a half. So, questionable. The end result is we have our trough. The trough goes negative about one state sooner than we'd like. It's roughly vertical here. For the dynamite storm in the Ohio Valley, you really want it to be going negative at the Mississippi River. So we're just a little bit early on that. And then we really start to go negative. The upper low closes off. We actually get 2 closed isobars, which means this thing is just a monster. And this is where the surface map falls apart. So, going back a few frames, if this is accurate, the trough has gone negative. What we would expect is there to be a low somewhere here, right? And you've got a vortmax moving around the bottom. We could go look at wind speed, but vortmax and wind speed are pretty close. That's feeding energy into the surface low, spinning it up counterclockwise. That low's track would then follow roughly these isobars just to the east of the upper low, because it's, again, that's the steering forces, right? The surface map does that. The surface map brings the upper low across the state, kind of like some of the earlier runs from yesterday. But the surface map also develops a very serious dry slot and lacks a lot of precipitation underneath of this upper low. And if you followed me for years, you know that one of the things I always say is we never trust a closed low moving off across Kentucky, because closed lows can generate their own weather at the surface. It's not entirely a surface feature. There will be lift under this closed low, especially becoming a double closed low. You see the 2 isobars come across. There is an enormous amount of energy. This will probably generate its own cold air aloft, which means that the surface temperature profiles also aren't correct. So what does that mean? Put all that together for this run of the GFS. It means that, I'm not really 100% certain that this run is true to at least the recent pattern that we've seen. This is certainly a pattern-changing storm. It could be correct, but it doesn't look quite like what I would expect the final solution to be. I think that until we get a little bit better understanding of what's happening aloft, do not look at surface map. Do not look at a precipitation type map. Do not look at a snow accumulation map. And wait until the upper levels really get uniform between models before you start looking to the lower levels. This is standard stuff. This is something that I say for every single winter storm that comes through. The difference here is the ultimate potential of this storm. It's not there's nothing about this storm other than the fact that there's a ton of energy with it, and that one thing being special about this storm is what makes modeling look terrible. The models have a hard time handling that energy. There's, going through this model, you're seeing aliasing all the way down, and you all probably can't see that. You're seeing aliasing all the way down into the Gulf. There's aliasing in energy that's continuing to drop into the storm even after it's formed. The models are going to have a hard time, and we've seen that, and that's what makes model watching, I think everybody will agree. This generates a blizzard somewhere in the Midwest. I'm not afraid to say that. Where? It's a little bit more difficult. If I had to put my money on it right now, I would say that your surface low is going to track somewhere between, we'll say, E-Town and Hazard, and it's going to track generally toward Cleveland or maybe like Pittsburgh, right? So your biggest threat area is going to be along and to the west of that track, depending on how much moisture it has, how much energy that's generated. I would say right now your highest threat for a major blizzard would be along the I-71 corridor, and I would say that there's a lesser but still existent threat just to the east of that. I would also say that there are parts of the Great Lakes in New England that are included, but I'm not going to worry about that because that's outside of my region. I'm not a national forecast meteorologist. Additional things of note. outside of the upper low, or sorry, outside of the surface low, the upper low is worth watching its path because anywhere that's under that has a chance to exceed expectations. Areas underneath this closed low are going to experience dramatic uplift and increased snow ratios. If you're looking at, again, the snow maps, you shouldn't be, but if you are and you're looking at the Kuchera ratio, that's useful, behind like the cold front or away from the mixing line, it's probably going to underdo the snow ratios underneath of that upper low. It's going to be fluffy snow. There's going to be a lot of wind. The snow will be very dry. 20 to 1 is possible as a ratio in this situation. Exceeding 20 to 1 is possible. But then the question becomes how much moisture is available. 20 to 1 with a tenth of an inch of moisture is still a good snow. For the people that are not the weather geeks, the question isn't whether there's going to be a blizzard or what travel conditions are going to look like or what the energy's doing. It's going to be, are we going to have a white Christmas? I think basically everywhere in the state's got a chance at a white Christmas. I don't see that not happening, right? How much and how much of an impact is yet to be seen. We'll go over to the live stream real quick. Cameron says he's looking at the surface map right now. Snow drifts in Kentucky. Yeah, I mean, so if we do get this this high wind and really any amount of snow, you're going to see drifting. Some of the upper end estimates of the snow that I've seen, you would actually have drifting that causes problems for like road equipment, like handling the amount of snow. But I don't know that the majority of the state even. I'm not even willing to say right now that any of the states sees that because there are still problems. And I posted like Friday the spoilers, right? I'm trying really hard to not get hyped up about this storm because climatologically, and I'm everybody that's here knows I'm big on climatology. This storm doesn't happen very often. I can remember back in the range of 2003, 2007, somewhere, we had a Christmas and it looked all for the world like we were going to have a white Christmas. And it ended up raining in Maysville, but Cincinnati got like a foot of snow. That's still on the table here because I believe in climatology, and that's something that has happened in the past. That said, there are analogs with other years where a storm has rolled through like this and caused a blizzard across a big chunk of Kentucky. And I guess that brings up another interesting statement. And I'm not going to put it on the surface map because I don't think we need to see that right now. But if you are peeking at the snow maps, they're showing a very narrow corridor of heavy snow setting up east, or this is probably the westernmost extent, could potentially come east. Blizzards don't happen like that. I don't know when the last time anybody on this feed looked at a blizzard warning, but blizzard warnings usually take the shape of like an L because the highest winds are outside of the rain, happen on the back and southern side, and occasionally they'll take on a U shape. And when they do that, they just issue a big block for a blizzard warning. So keep in mind the definition of a blizzard is winds exceeding 35 miles an hour and visibility of less than a quarter mile for 3 hours. It doesn't even have to snow to have a blizzard. And this thing's going to generate wind no matter where you're at in Kentucky. If there's any snow at all, blizzard, that becomes immediately a possibility. The thing that's not being talked about enough with this storm is the extreme cold that comes in afterward. We're talking single digits on Christmas morning. We're talking about people on the road with cars that are probably not going to handle that temperature very well. We're talking about life-threatening. No snow at all happens. The cold is still here on Christmas, and it's dangerous. And people should really be pushing that narrative because obviously if there's 3 inches of snow on, or if there's 6 inches of snow on, or if there's a foot of snow on, you're not going to be traveling that much. But if it's clear and cold, people are going to go out, and if you don't have an emergency kit in your car, that could be devastating to a group of people. If you have small kids, you're taking the grandparents. You are going to need to be prepared for the cold, and the cold's going to arrive quickly. I would never bet on Arctic air being early, but the temperatures will fall very quickly when it does get here because it's deep Arctic air. And I mean, it's coming right out of the northern Rockies, the southern Rockies, or the southern end of the Rockies in Canada, right out of Alaska. It's the coldest air on this side of the planet, and it's going to be targeting Kentucky. I mean, it's going to pour in like a bucket. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the GFS. Looks like Bailey's just dropped a post here. High winds, and he's not really to even say it impacts of the storm, which is right in line with me. It's Bernie Rayno is going to drop a live at 1. It's probably what he's going to say. I still firmly believe, because no single model has locked on a solution, that we're in the windshield wiper zone. I think that this is representing about as far west as the storm gets. It's entirely possible that we're starting to see the windshield wiper. The way it works, it's like a spring. Okay, so a storm will be way west and then way east, and then a little bit less west, a little bit less east, a little bit less west, and a little bit less east, and it settles on a track. Yesterday we saw a storm track that took the heaviest snows through this area. 2 days ago, we saw a storm track that took the heaviest snows through this area. We're down now to seeing oscillations. Last night, the storm was the actual track of the low itself. That would be a better indicator. The surface low. We saw this track and this track, and then yesterday we saw a track that looked like something this. We saw a track that looked something like this. And today we're back to a track that's running right up the middle of the state. And I think tonight it's going to oscillate back out here. So you tell me, where do you think that surface low ends up? To me, for all the world, it looks like we're coming in, maybe Somerset, and we're heading up toward like Lewis County, Greenup County, and that's going to be the surface low. And that will draw warm air in. There will be rain on the front side of this. There will be a tremendous amount of snow on the backside, and it will be a wind-driven snow, and it will be rough for those areas. And unfortunately, we're in Kentucky. We're always on the line. There's going to be a mixing zone. And that's something that really not any of the models, maybe 1 or 2 runs of various models in the last few days has picked up, is there's going to be an area where there's some sleet mixing in, and very few of the models are picking up on that. It's probably going to be really narrow. As hard as the cold air is charging, that zone is not going to be wide, but it's going to be there, and it will cut into some of those totals, especially right along that track of that low. What else do we have to look at? I believe the Canadian has come in, so we can switch over to that real quick, and you can see right away, man. So this is Clay Live reacts to the Canadian model. The Canadian model's much faster with this storm. Same time frame, 138 hours out. Our runs got reset. All right, so we're 57 hours out on the Canadian. Canadian's not finished over here yet. We'll go over here and look where we're at. 132 hours. It's departing the state. FS. 132 hours is departing the state. So they're actually they're syncing up a little bit here, which is good to see. The Canadian had been moving toward the GFS, actually. Over to 32 hours. Canadian's still a little bit faster. Similar evolution. We're well negative west of the Mississippi River. It's a little bit sooner than we want to see. And a surface low deepening 519 to 513 crosses the state from, say, Evansville to Ashland. A little bit flatter, I guess. This low is going like from Paducah to northeastern Kentucky, Ashland area, so it's a little bit steeper. It also looks like it's digging more. I don't actually have the I don't have the identifier on here. 5068 at the center at the isobar. It's 5092. Back over here, said it's dropping to 5100. So maybe 50, 90. So the GFS is a little bit stronger, and a little bit digs a little bit more. That's to be expected. As these upper air models converge, you will begin to see the surface maps make more sense. Point being, I don't think this is time to panic and say the storm's off. I think lacking significant snowfall, it's still a massively impactful event on a very busy travel time. The cold is going to be a huge issue statewide, regardless of the amount of snow. And we probably have, I'm going to say, 2 more model runs before the tracks really start to lock. I would expect the midnight run tonight to be fairly stable. There will still be some minor variations run to run, but at the upper atmosphere levels, fairly safe. If you have any questions, hit me up over on Twitter. If you are not, follow me over on Facebook, facebook.com/ClaydarWeather. And as always, the website has real-time data that you can look at, and Twitter feed is available there if for some reason Twitter breaks and you can't get in, which is entirely a possibility. So with that, I'm going to kill this live stream. Maybe we do it again this evening. Maybe not. Maybe we wait until Monday evening until people start to get a better handle on it. The models start to get a better handle on it. But it's one to watch. And I will say that, okay, GFS now showing a triple closed low coming over the state. Doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen very often. So regardless of the outcome, White Christmas, very likely, at least an inch of snow on the ground Christmas, I think, is doable. Blowing snow is going to be a problem no matter the amount we get. Drifts in the areas that get in on big snow are going to be a problem, and then just the brutal cold coming in. Keep an eye on the upper level low over the Hudson Bay region between the lakes and the Hudson Bay. That's the key. Last night I had mentioned that I was worried about some of the midweek energy disrupting that low. I don't see that as being a problem. That upper low is acting independently of the energy that's coming in midweek. So we can roll through that one more time and just take a look at it. You see the energy over central US down here, not interacting with that Hudson Bay low. Let's see which direction that goes. Right. So if it's pushing southeast, it's a sign that the storm's going to be more of a deal here. It's going to be a little bit further east. If it pushes to the northeast, the storm's going to be a little bit flatter. They dig a little bit further west, not dig quite as deep, the flatter part. And we'll keep tracking. We'll keep watching each model run, and eventually we'll put out a forecast. But that's the time to do that is not right now. So with that, I do have my beverage with me. Today it's a Monster Energy drink because I stayed up too late watching model runs last night. I'm going to take a sip of my beverage, and I'm going to end the live stream. Have a fun day of football. Keep watching the models, and we'll meet back here at some point in the next 24 to 36 hours and talk about it all again. This has been Claydar Live.